Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the West and the East Turlock Subbasin GSA Technical Advisory Committees. Just a couple of notes here that you've heard from me before. Please don't put the call on hold if you're on the phone. Please unmute and mute accordingly, as we've all learned to do during these Zoom meetings. We're recording the meeting. We have meeting materials. There's one presentation that's going to be part of the agenda on the groundwater monitoring network that is now available on our site at turlockgroundwater.org. So I encourage you to, if you want to take a look at that during or after, feel free and do that. And then, of course, as we always do, we will have a public comment period up at the front portion of the agenda. And then we'll always look for comment from others during the agenda items as well. So with that being said, I'll kick it over to the chairs for the agenda, and I'll pull the agenda up onto the screen.
Good afternoon, Herb. I'm Michael Cook for Turlock Irrigation District, representing the West Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee. Who is helping out from the east side today? Is it Sarah or Lacey? Who's helping me chair?
Gonna be me.
Oh,
Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. So ordinarily at this point, I would call the West Turlock Subbasin meeting to order. But right now I have Turlock Irrigation District is me and others. I have Karen from Ceres, Lacey, Merced County, David Odom from Denair, Jamel's representing Modesto. I missed anybody because right now I only have 5 members. Well, now I see it.
This is Jim with City Modesto.
Okay. You're on twice, Jim. Anybody else from the West Turlock Subbasin that I've missed? Okay, I got TID, Ceres, Merced County, Denair, CSD, and City Modesto.
Turlock has joined, Michael. Tara Rodriguez.
Yeah, I don't know if Tara's actually an official member of the TAC, so she's just the clerk. Not a member. So, thanks, Tara. Been waiting for Carl.
Can you go?
Okay. So we'll keep moving forward. Obviously, when we get to our action items, the West Turlock can't take any actions. With that, I'll hand over to Sarah and we call to order the East Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee. Sarah.
And I think I have the same problem. I show Lacey and Matt. It looks like Walt's connecting.
Walt's just joined.
I may make a lot of mistakes here. So does that give us enough?
Okay.
Myself, Walt, Lacey, and Matt?
It does. Our quorum is 3.
Thanks, Lacey. So I call the East Turlock GSA TAC to order.
Wonderful. And I have my compatriots on the West Turlock. If you see people joining and I miss them, just let me know. We'll move on to item number 3 on our agenda, the approval of minutes from the June 24th, 2021. I think it's whoever calling user number 1 is, could you please go on mute because we get a lot of feedback from your line. So obviously the West Turlock right now, we don't have a quorum, so we can't take action. So Sarah, maybe the East Turlock wants to take action on those minutes.
I get a motion to approve the minutes of June 24th from someone on East Turlock.
Does Walt move approval?
Thanks. Second.
Lacey will second.
Thanks. First from Walt, second from Lacey. I can do a roll call of Lacey.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Walt.
Yes.
And yes for myself. Motion carries.
Okay, your minutes stand approved. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, moving on to item number 4, public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the Technical Advisory Committee on any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Technical Advisory Committee. And you if you want to talk about an item that's agendized, you can talk about it now, or ideally hold that until we get to that section of the agenda. So with that, any public participation, generally items not on the agenda. Please go ahead now. Okay, not hearing anyone. Herb, do you see any hands raised?
I do not at this time.
Me neither. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 5, budget. Just so you know, Michael Clipper is not with us today. He did ask me to convey to you that everything is in good order in the West Turlock account, and you should have received invoices from him for your next installment. That's members of the West Turlock Subbasin GSA. So keep an eye out for those. If you didn't receive something, please follow up with Michael. And I do need to follow up with the City of Houston, because I believe we emailed their appointed member of the GSA board. We probably need to get the right staff member to make sure that invoice goes to the staffer who would process that for payment. So with
Michael,
that,
I can let you know Stanislaus County received the invoice and we're processing payment right now.
perfect. And you're flush with money over there, Walt, so that's good. We'll expect, maybe you can prepay for next year too, while you're at it. Okay, that sounds good. Any questions about the West Turlock GSA budget? Okay, hearing none, over to you, Sarah, for East Turlock.
Okay, I'm going to lean on one of my other board members to see, committee members, see if they have any updates on the agenda. I mean, on the budget.
This is Lacey. I would just say that there was a board meeting earlier this morning, and Karen Whip gave the update, the financial update at the board meeting then. And so for here, I don't think I have anything extra.
I think the only other thing to add is the Prop 218 process for the East Turlock Subbasin GSA is going forward. We have action agendized. I think it's August 26th.
It should be August 12th
12th?
for the Prop 218 hearing, and then the next board meeting will be the 26th.
Okay, and then that comes right at the deadline for getting the tax rolls over to Merced County and Stanislaus County so that they can begin to collect the revenues this fall.
Thank you, Walt. And Lacey.
Okay, thank you, guys. Any other questions on the East Turlock GSA budget? Okay, not hearing anything, we'll move on to item number 6, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Monitoring Network update. And we'll review and discuss the proposed monitoring network. And we have Phyllis Stannon from Todd Groundwater who will make that presentation. So over to you, Phyllis.
Thank you very much. Let me get a screen up here and we will begin. Let's see, can we see my screen already? Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you, everyone. It's nice to see familiar names and faces again. Today, I'd like to review with you the draft GSP monitoring network that we have put together for the subbasin. One of the things that I'll just begin by saying is, as with most subbasins in the Central Valley and actually in the state of California, the existing monitoring programs don't perfectly align with SGMA requirements. And as such, there's going to be need for monitoring improvements to occur in the future. But having said that, I think we have a really robust plan to move forward with respect to monitoring in this subbasin. We have been able to cover all of the sustainability indicators and all of the principal aquifers. And I'm going to go through those maps and a few examples of the hydrographs that we're going to be using to be able to track sustainable management criteria going forward. The presentation today will encompass an overview of the monitoring network. And again, moving through the sustainability indicators that are applicable to this Turlock subbasin, including chronic lowering of water levels, reduction of groundwater and storage, depletions of interconnected surface water, land subsidence, and degraded water quality, all of which you have reviewed as a TAC and approved the sustainable management criteria to move forward. At the end of the presentation, I'll be glad to take as many comments and as much discussion as the TAC members would like to have today. But I would ask that just to move the schedule forward, if we would consider a recommendation today from the TAC to include this draft GSP monitoring network into the GSP so that we can get that chapter finished and out for everyone's review. So let's dive right in with the first map. This is a map representing sustainable management criteria from the chronic lowering of groundwater levels. And it represents the western upper principal aquifer. And that's the unconsolidated sediments that we have in the aquifer system above the Corcoran clay and west of that dashed red line. I know many of you know already from many maps that we've looked at in the past that that dashed red line is the extent of the Corcoran clay in the subsurface. And so the western principal aquifer is above the Corcoran clay, and this network consists of about 20 wells combined from the current CASGIM program, and also anticipating some additional proposed wells being drilled right now. As it turns out, we're putting that plan together right now to get in the field for the Prop 68 grant funded wells. There are 2 wells that are circled in red on your map there. They may be unusable. We're continuing to make improvements to this monitoring program daily, as you can imagine. They may be insufficient for tracking criteria, and as such, they may be removed. Even if they are, we have sufficient numbers of wells to move forward for the chronic lowering of water levels and the western upper principal aquifer. So those aren't deal breakers, but we are looking at the details of those data. For these wells, we are hopefully going to be tracking the minimum thresholds, which are the fall 2015 low water levels, and the measurable objectives, which are the average or a midpoint between the historic high water level and the MT. So you can see from the way that I've referred to these MTs and MOs, we're relying a bit on historical data from these wells. And I thought it might be helpful to see examples of those historical data. And so I've got 3 quick examples that I'd like to pop up so that you can get an idea about how these MTs and MOs are set and how they might be tracked in the future. So this is one example. You can see on the map on the lower right by the red dot where this hydrograph is. And this hydrograph essentially is one of the ones that's based on measured data. So we have enough information on this hydrograph to be able to select an MT and an MO according to the criteria that have been established. So I just will note also that you can see that there's a lower water level in 2016. So not all the wells responded perfectly together. Fall 2015 represents the historic low level for most wells, but some wells did continue to decline in 2016. You can see that on this example where we just had one point that went down in 2015 as the low water level, and that is now the minimum threshold for the well. This is a well that's in the western portion of the subbasin, as you can see by the red dot, and there are very small fluctuations in this area. The area is characterized by shallow groundwater. It's very near the river in this area as well. And as such, I've expanded that vertical scale quite a bit there just so we could take a look at the historical data. But if you put that back to the other vertical scales, you would see that there's very little fluctuation in this well. Nonetheless, we're able to establish an MT and an MO according to our rules and can move forward using this well to track. Here is the last example that I have from this western upper principal aquifer. It's also has a good record for historical data, and as such, we can use an MT and an MO based on those measured data. Moving now to the lower principal aquifer in the west, this is the sediments that are below the Corcoran clay and west of that red dashed line. You can see that there are substantially fewer wells in the lower aquifer. That's primarily because there are very few wells that are screened solely in that lower aquifer. That may be part of the reason why you've had no impacts at all with respect to land subsidence. But nonetheless, we do have some wells screened in the lower aquifer, 8 of them that we were able to pull together for the monitoring network. That consists of city-owned multi-completion monitoring wells. A shout out to the cities for letting us use their wells in this program. The USGS has a well down near the Merced River below the Corcoran Clay. And then again, we are proposing new wells that will be drilled very soon in concert with the Proposition 68 grant program. A minimum threshold has been set for these wells using 2015 low water levels and measurable objective using the midpoint in the same way that we did for the upper aquifer. And I have just a few examples of those as well. You can see now from this hydrograph that we're in the land of not as much data. We do have some recent data from the City of Ceres well. And as a result of that, we have enough information to pull together the criteria for the well. But we had to rely on October 2015 contours. So two things we've been doing here. If we don't have a sufficient amount of information on the hydrograph for using measured data within the well, we have done several things. We have looked at similarly screened wells nearby and compared those data back to these wells. If we feel like that they are behaving similarly, then we can use that information to set the MTs and the MOs. If we don't have nearby data, then we've been using our contours from the water level contour maps, which of course are based on measured data. So you can get the picture here that we are pulling together some estimates. I feel like that they're technically justifiable estimates, but estimates nonetheless, and we will watch how we track it going forward, and we may need to adjust as we get into GSP implementation. And another example here from the Western Lower Principal Aquifer using a City of Turlock well, again, a multi-completion well that we selected the most representative multi-port in that well, and using contour information to set the MT. Moving now to the Eastern Principal Aquifer, you can see we've got very good coverage in the east now, thanks to a huge effort made by the East Turlock Subbasin GSA with respect to expanding their monitoring network. There are some data gaps still in this program, however, and one of them is in the northwest, in the northeastern portion of the West Turlock Subbasin GSA, where there's only a couple of wells available. I've got that arrow showing on the map there that there's an additional well budgeted for this fiscal year to go into this area so that we can have better understanding and tracking in the northeastern portion of the West Turlock Subbasin GSA. This program right now has about 21 wells in it, a combination of all of the work done by the East Turlock Subbasin GSA, as well as a city multi-completion well. And again, anticipating that some new wells are getting ready to be drilled right now under the Prop 68 grant. And then there will be further new wells added under the Technical Support Services program that the DWR has put forth and has awarded the subbasin some additional grant funding for that. And then I mentioned the additional well near Houston that's already budgeted for this fiscal year. Minimum thresholds and measurable objectives are set in this aquifer in the same way that they were in the other two aquifers. And I have some examples here. For the well in the northwestern portion of the Eastern Principal Aquifer, we had a good record and measured data could be used to select the MT and the MO. With respect to this well, we have very good information recently, but no historical information. But we did have a good nearby Department of Water Resources well and historical record from the Water Data Library. So we combined that information with this information to set the MT and the MO. For this well, we have a very good historical and current record, but you can see that there are a lot of fluctuations, probably from either, if not pumping in this well, pumping in a nearby well. And as a result of that, it complicates things a little bit. But there's a couple of things to say with respect to being concerned about tracking a well that has this kind of fluctuation. So one thing to say is that we're comparing data from one well to itself. So however a well has responded historically is likely how it's going to continue to respond in the future with respect to the changing water levels. And as a result of that, we feel comfortable that as long as we are tracking the water levels, we can anticipate changes and see changes within that well. And then the other thing to remind ourselves here is that our definition of undesirable results will be based on more than one event and one well. So it's really the collective program that's more important rather than what might occur in just one well. Nonetheless, we'll want to watch and track. And if we have a problematic well, then we'll probably want to swap that out for an additional well in the future, which there's no problem with doing that. I've seen many programs from the critically overdrafted basins already changing out monitoring wells as they've moved along. There's the last example that I have from the Eastern Principal Aquifer here. You can see that we're getting good data in more recent times, but don't have the exact specific date that we needed for the minimum threshold. Nonetheless, I think we did a pretty good job with just using this existing data and sort of estimating a possible rate of decline and sort of backing that up. So using the data in this well, we were able to sort of put together the MT and the MO for this well going forward. Moving now to the reduction of groundwater and storage. No maps at all for this one because they are identical to the ones you have just seen. You might recall that for the sustainable management criteria for this indicator, we are using the MTs and MOs from chronic lowering of water levels as a proxy. So that applies to all three principal aquifers, the exact same MTs and MOs, same monitoring network. So killing two birds with one stone there for the overlap in programs. For the interconnected surface water, we do have some data gaps that we'll be filling. We wanted wells. Our goal here is to have some shallow wells along each of the river boundaries. We have 12 wells in the program right now, a combination of CASGEM wells, USGS wells, East Turlock Subbasin wells, and the proposed wells from the technical services program. There are 4 wells at one location, so 12 is not the exact number with respect to distribution along the rivers, and there are significant data gaps that we do want to fill. The minimum thresholds are being set at fall 2015 for the Tuolumne and the San Joaquin rivers. For the Merced River, you might recall that we had some input from Merced Irrigation District and water rights holders along the Merced River that 2015 conditions were very difficult, and in order to maintain that good connection between the groundwater system and surface water system and to minimize stream flow depletion, we set the water levels a little higher for minimum thresholds along the Merced River at spring 2014 water levels. The measurable objective approach was the same, a midpoint between the MTs and the historic highs. Before we move on, I want to just talk about a few improvements that we are moving forward with on this particular program. Along the Tuolumne River to the north, you can see that we really need a lot of wells to bolster the program. We have 2 wells in the East Turlock from the East Turlock Subbasin GSA work in the eastern portion of the Tuolumne River, and essentially in the western portion, there are no wells at all right now. We are working with the city of Ceres, who's been very helpful with respect to of finding an irrigation well, which isn't pumping, which is a criteria of ours not to have an active production well. And so we might be able to pull that well into the program. And then there are shallow wells along that river that are budgeted for this fiscal year. And so we are moving forward with additional monitoring wells. And I'll also just mention that the Modesto Subbasin has recently installed several wells along that river, one in Empire, one in Waterford, for example, and one in Modesto. And so this will give us the opportunity for our shallow wells to twin those wells and give us more technical information with respect to groundwater flow direction, both into and out of the river. For the San Joaquin River, the wells are available, but a little far away from the river. The Delta Mendota Subbasin to the west of the San Joaquin River has already contacted us. They are a critically overdrafted basin, and they're in the throes of their GSP implementation now, and they are planning a shallow river monitoring well program on their side of the river. And so this will also give us an opportunity to coordinate with them. And then in the Merced River, in that western area, you can see I've got a red circle around USGS wells and a TID well that are all sort of closely spaced in one area. What we have there are multi-completion wells all within the shallow aquifer, and the TID well, which is also completed in the shallow aquifer. And we're not quite sure, because we don't have good historical record for the USGS wells, we're not quite sure which of those wells are most appropriate for tracking the interactions between the groundwater system and the river. And so we don't necessarily need to keep all 3 of those USGS wells in the program going forward. But what we'd like to do is to recommend to the GSAs to monitor all of them initially. It doesn't add much to the cost. You're already there doing the measurements to those wells. And that will give the GSAs an opportunity going forward to see which of those wells are most relevant for tracking the sustainable management criteria in that area. So again, a lot of improvements envisioned for this, but I believe that we have a sufficient number of wells in place to track and move forward. With respect to a couple of examples, we show a good record here for one of the wells in the Southwest, where we have an MT and an MO based on measured data. And then moving to the Merced, this is an example near that cluster that I just talked about, where we have some relatively good information, just not a full record of it, for setting the MT and the MO at that location. And then a well here that we have very good information on recently and moving forward. We just don't have good historical data. Nonetheless, we have good information in the area and have been able to base this MT and MO on a nearby well. And then I'll just mention this as well. There's also a well up near Turlock Lake that is, as you can see from the hydrograph, has very high water levels. And we place the MT and the MO on historical water level contour maps just because we didn't have any information nearby. But the well might be just simply measuring inflow from Turlock Lake and not as capable of looking at the river. So we may need to either make adjustments here or get an additional well in the area for the future. Now moving to land subsidence, we are focused for land subsidence only west of that red line because we believe that land subsidence is more likely to occur in the future in areas where we have the Corcoran unconsolidated sediments and the Corcoran clay. This is what we've seen throughout the entire Central Valley. We've talked a lot about that in previous presentations. And so we have put together measurable objectives and minimum thresholds for the Western Upper Principal Aquifer and the Western Lower Principal Aquifer. In this program for the Western Upper, you can see that there are 20 wells, combination of KASGEM and future proposed wells for the Prop 68. You can see that this looks suspiciously like the very first map you looked at because it is the same map. It is the same map that we are using for the MTs and the MOs for the chronic lowering of water levels. So I won't go through any examples that you've already looked at, but I just wanted to at least reproduce this one map to help you be assured that we are monitoring both aquifers for land subsidence. The key aquifer, of course, to worry about with respect to potential inelastic land subsidence for the future is the Western Lower Principal Aquifer. There are 8 wells that we've put together so far, and they are similar to the ones that we put together for chronic lowering of water levels. We really have just not very many wells in this area. But because of how we have established the MTs and MOs in this area, we have the opportunity of being able to assign very good sustainable management criteria to even a new well, and even when there are very poor historical data, because one of the things we want to achieve for land subsidence is not to depressurize or de-water the Corcoran clay. And as such, we want our water levels to stay well above the Corcoran clay, and therefore the Corcoran clay itself can be used in this particular case as the minimum threshold. So let's just look at an example of what that looks like. You can see here that we don't have a very complete well. This is the hydrograph we looked at previously with respect to the chronic lowering of water levels from the city of Ceres. And you can see that we've selected an MT at the top of the Corcoran elevation down there at the bottom of this hydrograph. Just because this well is screened below the Corcoran clay doesn't mean that it has water levels below the Corcoran clay. The water levels are confined, and as you can see in this example, are well above the Corcoran clay, but we want to keep it that way so that we don't trigger any future land subsidence. For this particular well, even though the minimum threshold is at the top of the elevation of the Corcoran clay, this well will be controlled by chronic lowering of water levels, which has a higher MT. So it's just an example of one well serving two purposes, but really will be controlled by the higher MT assigned for the well. And then similar to the chronic lowering of water levels, we've also incorporated this additional City of Turlock multi-completion well, again, setting the MT with the Corcoran clay, but recognizing that this well is also being used for chronic lowering of water levels, so that higher MT will control our tracking in this well. And then the final sustainability criteria is water quality. And I put this map in because I wanted to make the point again that this is why we aren't, as GSAs, instituting a new water quality monitoring program, because we have a lot of water quality monitoring data that's being done under other permits, under other regulatory programs by others. And so a nice opportunity to take advantage of all of this additional work being done in the subbasin. This is just water quality data from January 2020 to the present. So you can see that there's a lot of wells being sampled for the constituents of concern in our subbasin, as well as a variety of other constituents. So we can simply compile these data as required by our definition of minimum thresholds for this indicator, for this sustainability indicator. We will be compiling data from the GeoTracker website for the constituents of concern and making sure that any of the GSA actions are not creating new exceedances of any of these constituents in any of the water supply wells that are being monitored. You can see there, I've just tracked the number of wells from this one download. 87 wells have been analyzed for arsenic, 339 for nitrate, 59 for TDS, 34 for uranium, 80 for 123-TCP, 74 for PCE. So there's a lot of data, a tremendous amount of data, and a lot of good data to use for an annual analysis of the water quality conditions within the subbasin to avoid undesirable results. So that's it for me with respect to the maps and graphs. And I'll just do a quick summary slide here. So what you have just seen is a total of about 54 unique wells across the subbasin, being able to monitor and track all of the sustainability indicators that are applicable to the subbasin. We're incorporating water quality data by others on an annual basis. We recognize there's data gaps, but we think that they're already being addressed. We've not even submitted the GSP, and already there are some proposals for improvements to the monitoring network. New monitoring wells are being planned. New monitoring wells are actually getting ready to be drilled right now under 2 programs under existing grants. And then we may also add additional wells that we might want to use to assess the performance of projects once they begin to be implemented in the subbasin. We will improve our sustainable management criteria over time. DWR recognizes that we're not going to be perfect the first time, even though I've tried hard. I'm sure I didn't hit the mark. And so we will need to reassess, and we will be able to do that at the 5-year mark with respect to upgrading the GSP. We also will have a management action in your GSP that documents that these future monitoring network improvements are ongoing, so that DWR can show that the GSAs are committed to improving this network. And then I will just also make the plea from the technical team that we are modifying these networks now as we speak, but we can't wait until everything is just absolutely perfect before we bring it in front of you. So we ask for your patience and your flexibility with respect to approval of this plan. If we get the City of Series data and it looks like it's going to be able to track the Tuolumne, then we'd like to be able to add that well. We will learn from these new wells that we're getting ready to install how best to move forward with them. So we will have some additional data to add from those as well. So there will be some additional modifications going forward, but I think overall we have the network together. You have approved your sustainable management criteria, and we're ready to track the progress of sustainable management in the subbasin. So at this point, I'm going to stop and take questions, and I would love to participate in any discussions that you might want to have about the programs. Ultimately, I request that you provide us with an approval to move forward in the GSP, recognizing that there will be improvements made even before adoption. So thank you very much for listening to all of this, and happy to take questions.
Hey, thank you very much, Phyllis.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Phyllis, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Milt.
Hi, Phyllis. Yes, I did have a question. When you were talking about the subsidence monitoring, you said, I wanted you to explain the reason again for not monitoring subsidence in the East Subbasin. And if you're not monitoring it, how will you know if subsidence occurs?
Excellent question. So the first thing I will say is that the regulations require that you set sustainable management criteria in areas that you feel that there would be likely future impacts. And given the technical conditions within the Central Valley that we've seen historically and to date, almost all of the problems that have been associated with subsidence in the valley have been the result of these collapsible clays that are all associated with sort of depositional environments of the past that have set the conditions for making these clays quite collapsible and able to be depressurized. In the eastern portion of the subbasin, although we do have some unconsolidated sediments on the surface, we get into more consolidated sediments and more consolidated aquifers with depth. And as a result of that, those are less likely to be subject to land subsidence. However, that doesn't mean that we're going to ignore it, and it doesn't mean that if it happens, we won't be able to see it, because we are the GSAs have committed as part of their land subsidence criteria to looking annually at INSAR data that's being published by the Department of Water Resources. This is a very sophisticated, processed satellite imagery data, processed by others, point out, and it provides us with very, very high resolution changes within vertical displacement across the entire subbasin. You might recall during one of the subsidence discussions that we had, I think we had 4 or 5 different meetings on land subsidence with the public, and we presented some of those data. You might recall it was the sort of gray and orange and red colored maps that we saw with respect to subsidence. So it isn't as if we're not going to be tracking it. And then in addition to all of that, one last thing is sort of like a backstop of the backstop of the backstop. And that is that we have set aggressive minimum thresholds for the eastern principal aquifer in the same way that we have for the entire subbasin, with chronic lowering of water levels set at fall 2015 levels, recognizing that we'll go a little bit deeper during drought years, but we'll be able to recover. And so because of that MT, we don't anticipate, especially once we get all of the projects in place, we wouldn't anticipate that we would be operating water levels below historical lows. And if you keep water levels in your subbasin above your historical lows, then you prevent from future exacerbation of land subsidence. So three levels of protection there, even though we're not calling the MTs that we're setting land subsidence MTs. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Phyllis. Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
Very,
thank you.
very good explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Mel, any other questions from the public or the TAC members? As you know, one of our challenges has always been a lack of data. So I think Liz and Phyllis have worked incredibly hard trying to come up with a representative network to do the best we can with the information we have. Like Sigma requires the best available information. I think we have that. And as Phyllis mentioned, over time, as we find out more and as we get new wells, and I know we're working on installing some new ones soon, that things may change over time, and that's okay. We're not set in stone today, but I think for Phyllis's comfort, as she's putting together the sustainability plan, we need to make sure we don't have any major concerns or obstacles preventing us from saying, this is a good network, as good as we can get today, and let's move forward and start using these as we need to as we put the plan together. So any more questions from anybody? Any clarifications?
Michael, we have looks like a raised hand from a representative from Leadership Council. Feel free and share what you question or comment.
Hi, thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. My name's Natalie. I'm a water policy coordinator for Leadership Council. I just have a quick question. I just wanted to ask to see if the monitoring net wells will be able to detect impacts to vulnerable drinking water users. And if not, is there a plan for filling that data gap?
Yes, I think so, Natalie. You might recall that we had an area of failed wells along the sort of central portion of our subbasin during the 2014 to 2017 about time frame. And that area I believe to be relatively well covered. There is a data gap in the northeastern portion of the West Turlock Subbasin with respect to the Houston area. And we're going to be filling that data gap very soon with one well, and then we have more planned. So, so it's a sort of combination answer to your question. Some areas are really well covered right now. Some are not as well covered, but we do recognize that we need wells to monitor and track criteria in those areas, and we've planned to do that.
Okay, in that northeastern area or near Houston, where you're going to build a well, or there's a well
Yes.
that? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so we have a well in our next fiscal year to get into that area. We do have another well there, and I'm proud to say that the well that we have there has an excellent record. So we feel strongly that we have selected a good MT and MO. And so it isn't as if we won't be monitoring that area right now. We are, but the well near Houston will give us an additional area to cover. It's an area of a lot of wells, as you may know, and so we need more than one well in our program to track.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for the question. Any others?
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Debbie.
Sorry, Michael. I just wanted to let the group know that I've been working with Phyllis on one item over on the Western Upper Principal Aquifer related to the monitoring network and the minimum thresholds and measurable objectives, which are in some cases, there's only a difference of a couple of feet between the minimum threshold and the measurable objective based on the methodology that we came up with, which is going to perhaps over time be difficult to work through. And it's in areas where water has been very high and close to the land surface. So it's not a really low level, it can be high. So Phyllis was going to incorporate some recognition that that may be an action or an area that we continue to work on in the future as we move through this process. Just because managing between 2 feet may be, really a difficult thing over time. Not that we haven't done that historically, but I don't want to throw be out of compliance because your MT gets exceeded in one well because you're lowering water levels because it's too high. And so we'll work our way through that. But don't be surprised if you see language in the draft as we work through this. So, and we'll talk more about that later. Does that make sense? Phyllis, I don't know, maybe you might want to say something else.
Yeah, it does make sense. And thank you for recognizing that. I mean, you might recall in one of our earlier graphs today, I had to expand the scale just so that we could see the difference between the MO and EMT. So with respect to compliance, the MO is not a compliance point. The MO is a goal. But there are areas where the water levels are too high to farm without using drainage wells. TID has done this historically, as has a lot of people along the river there. And so as a result of that, and as a result of being able to make sure that land uses are not impacted in the area and that people can still get a tractor on their farms, the drainage wells have been a help in that area. And we want to make best use of shallow groundwater. If we're going to pump it out, let's do something good with it. And we have the opportunity to supplement, and it's not an opportunity, it's something that TID has been doing for a long time. But from my point of view, it's an opportunity to supplement the local supply for agricultural irrigation. So we're handling this as a management action, and TID is committed to paying attention to the drainage wells and reporting that information and making sure that everything's done in a very transparent manner. So I haven't written it yet, which is why I didn't say anything about it, but I appreciate Debbie bringing that to the attention of the group. Any other comments or questions?
So this will ordinarily be an action-based item because the West Turlock folks don't have a quorum. We can't take action, but I would ask, inform me, does anybody have an issue with the network that Phyllis has presented right now and see any issues that would prevent her from going forward using this information and moving forward on work that's founded on this in the GSP? That's really a question for the West Turlock folks. Okay, I don't hear anybody. So with that, we'll take that position. And for the East Turlock folks, you're with a quorum, you're okay to take an action if you so want to.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, would I have a motion from someone on the east side to move forward with this monitoring network as proposed by Phyllis?
This Walt, I support that motion.
Second?
This is Lacey, I'll second.
Thanks. Okay, Walt, take a roll call vote. Walt?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on to item number 7, Sigma related updates. This is where TAC members discuss and provide updates on Sigma related issues. No actions are taken. Our normal first bullet is communication and outreach. So Herb, you have something for us?
Yeah, so I have 2 quick items. The first here, and I'm screen sharing on the Turlock Groundwater website, is just to announce what's there at the top in the green banner, that on July 8th, we released draft chapters 1, 2, and 4 of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan for comment. And the group is looking to get those comments by September 1st of this year. So there's a good amount of time to comment on those 3 chapters. And I'll just note here, as I'm here on this homepage, you could download the chapters. We have a couple different links to get to our GSP page, which you see here. And the page lists three things that are important, the three ways to comment on all sections of the GSP, not just these three, but these are certainly the first three. And then as you scroll down to the bottom, you will also see an area right here to connect with Dropbox and download that 50 megabyte document. And so just a note, as it's the first TAC meeting we've had since it's been released, that earlier this month on the 8th, we released that for public comment. So again, chapters 1, 2, and 4 available for public comment through September 1st. And the three ways to make comment are through regular mail to this address, email to our email that we have that's listed there. It's a Gmail. And then we have a web form that's available on our site as well. And so that is my first point. The second point, as I stop sharing my screen here, is that you may have heard from me in past meetings that we applied for facilitation support services funding from the Department of Water Resources. We were awarded that funding and got proper notification a couple weeks back. And what we've been given or awarded is funding for up to 502 hours of support services through the contractor that DWR is using, Stantec. Many of us have worked with them in the past. So 502 hours for services through June 30th of 2022. So note that takes us through development and adoption of the GSP and even into the implementation period if we have hours left, which is a good thing for outreach. So I'm not going to go through all the details, but there's 5 task areas that we'll be working on. There's public meeting support that's going to be provided by Stantec, GSP adoption support for all the things going up to for outreach leading up to GSP adoption, recorded presentation support, tribal government engagement support, and then interbasin coordination support. And we have some more details and subtasks within those 5 tasks. We met last week to kick off, just generally kick off the discussion. And we started talking about what the meetings will look like, which there'll be some virtual meetings and there'll be some in-person meetings as well. And so we're starting to talk about that. It's looking like the first meeting would be a virtual meeting to talk about these 3 chapters that I just mentioned in August sometime is what we're eyeing, and you'll hear more about that. But that would be the first kind of public-facing deliverable from this funding. One quick note here for the people on the call. The way we plan to work through this and get information to you all on the TAC is through the TAC's Ad Hoc Communications Committee. It's pretty small and nimble up to this point in the past when we've used that committee for certain tasks. So I just have a call out to all interested TAC members on this call or those who are not on this call that if they're interested in participating in FSS activities, the outreach and what we're doing, and we're working with when we work with the contractor with Stantec, send me an email or IM me my email, or you can even just, if you can't find my email, you can just go onto the website and send an email in that way, and I get those as well. And so we traditionally like to have representation from both GSAs to kind of have an entire sub-basin representation. So we like to have that, and I sit on that ad hoc committee as well. And so I'll always update this group as well. And so that is that. I will note for the record, it's early, but thus far we have not received any comments on the GSP. But then again, it's early and people are, I believe there's some 200 pages in the PDF to go through, a lot of which are administrative, but a lot of others are more technical. So obviously there's still plenty of time, but 3 ways to comment would be snail mail, email, and then going through the web form on our website. And so those are all available at turlockgroundwater.org/GSP. And that is my brief update. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Oh, Herb, this is Karen. I just have a real quick question. Are you able to see the statistics for how many people have downloaded the chapters or have, clicked and viewed or anything?
I haven't checked into it. It's through Dropbox, but my guess is it's just we're using a Turlock Irrigation District's account, and I know that we have ability to go in and notice that. I just haven't went through in the back end since I've uploaded it and taken a look. but I'm pretty sure I could probably get the metrics. That's a good point though, because you want to take a look if nobody's commented, but everyone's downloaded it, at least you know there's people going through it. So I'll give a look into that as well. And if I get some metrics, I'll report them out when we meet next month.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for her? Okay, hearing or seeing none. Schedule. Is that you, Debbie?
I think that's me. Just a quick update on the GSP schedule. As Herb mentioned, we do have a draft out for review. And as the TAC is aware, we are currently reviewing the water budget section. We are compiling the comments from the East and West Turlock TACs, and then we'll be meeting on Monday to work through those. And then the TAC will see all of the proposed comments and revisions back next week. And then we'll be sending those off to the technical consultant. So we'll have those back to them by the end of next week, and they'll be finalizing that. And then we'll be able to consider moving that to the public forum as well. And the next section that you'll be seeing is the sustainable management criteria section. In an email that the TAC saw that had a more detailed schedule, I think it called for the sustainable management criteria section to be released next week. But I think Phyllis needs a little more time on QA/QC on that, as we've just kind of given her the go-ahead on the monitoring network, which kind of relates to the sustainable management criteria and the minimum thresholds and all of that. So that will likely be pushed back just a week, and you'll probably see it the first week in August. So I wanted to give everyone a heads up on that, and more will be coming shortly. With that, the next section after that is the monitoring networks, and you guys took action earlier today, or at least East Turlock did, to move that forward. Also recognizing with that we do have another project for installing monitoring wells in our fiscal budget for this year and next year. So we'll add those in over time as well. So I just wanted to kind of give everybody a heads up on that. Next, I wanted to talk about as we're getting closer towards January 2022, when we need to adopt the GSP, we need to start thinking through the process for adopting it. Now, these are our GSAs, are not our JPAs within this subbasin. And so the JPAs have the authority to take action on the GSP, but the process to do that and all of that. And so I'm going to be bringing that to the ad hoc here in the coming weeks, so we can kind of begin working through that process and have something to bring back to the tax, and everybody can kind of be prepared for what process we would propose in going through the adoption process. So so I wanted to kind of give everybody a heads up on that as well. And then lastly, the round 3 grant. We have finished contracting for the monitoring wells, and so those will begin being constructed likely in late August, September. We have to schedule a meeting with the consultant now that the contracting is finished. We got final sign off yesterday, so it's pretty exciting. But we haven't gone through the details with the consultant and the contractor yet, and so that'll be forthcoming, and we'll give you guys a heads up on that. The GRAT is nearing completion, and I'll have an update for you at the next meeting. And as we start working through the project management actions, we're going to start the PEIR process as well. And so you'll be hearing more about that. So I guess that's my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Debbie? That was getting fun with the addition of the monitoring wells, so thanks for your work on that, Debbie, and everybody else. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none. Item number 8, next meeting. The next special meeting is scheduled for Thursday, August 12th, 2021, and the next regular meeting is Thursday, August 26th, 2021. And with that, well, I don't need to adjourn because I never had a meeting, apparently. So Sarah, would you like to adjourn your group?
Sure. Can we adjourn our group for the East Side? I think.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All right.
Second. This is Matt.
Thanks, Lacey and Matt. Do I need to do a roll call for this? Lacey,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Walt,
No.
and
Of
all those
course.
in favor, so it passes. The East Side is adjourned.
Well done. And great job, Sarah. Thanks for
Thank you.
stepping
Thank you,
in.
sir.
Okay, see everybody.